Hello, and welcome to Thought Tapestry. This is our fifth episode. We are recording our fifth episode. I hope you're so happy to be here. We're happy to be here with you. It is still March, and globally, it's actually International Women's Month. And so we wanted to bring you a story about, in my opinion, a pretty cool woman, because we always are for the women here. We're pro women. You're going to hear that throughout the pod. And cheers to the girls. I have my podcast host here, Keisha. Hello, hello.
Hello, Stephanie.
And I'm just going to kick in and start our story, shall I?
Go right ahead, girl. Let's get it.
Okay, so today we are talking about Amelia Earhart. Yeah. So Amelia Earhart was an American aviator and the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. Let's get into it a little bit. So she was born in July of 1897 in Kansas to a railway lawyer father and a mom who was from a pretty affluent family. She always displayed an adventurous and independent nature as a child and often defied traditional gender roles. And at that time, that meant that she played basketball. She took some auto repair courses, and then she did briefly attend college. All things that women weren't typically doing in 1897, which was the 19th century, which was 2 centuries ago, if you think about it. Kind of crazy. Anywho, so the death of her grandparents caused her family to struggle financially a little bit. And because of this, her father fell into alcoholism. And this kicked off this trajectory of them moving kind of all over the place. However, someday, the inheritance that she was to receive from her grandparents, her mother's inheritance, did come in. And then suddenly they were kind of back in society. And one of the first things they did with Earhart was enroll her into what was then known as the Ogant School in Rydell, Pennsylvania. And I did a little bit of reading on this school, and it's actually, or was at the time, very prestigious. And then as it continued to grow and more women started coming to the school, it was actually absorbed by the University of Pennsylvania. So they had ownership of it and kind of taught the girls like in this separate little cohort for many, many years, although it did eventually shut down. Anywho, I just thought that was interesting because I'm like, what's the Ogant School? I did one little search and so much came up. So it's like part of history. So maybe we'll talk about schools. Anyway, so during the time that she was in Pennsylvania, like living in kind of Northern America, or Northern United States of America, she went to visit her sister who was living in Canada and developed an interest in caring for soldiers that were wounded in World War One. So she actually left college to become a nurse's aide with the Red Cross in Toronto. However, she did spend a lot of her downtime watching pilots in the Royal Flying Corps train at the local airfield in Toronto. That's kind of how she started looking at the skies and was intrigued with what was going on there. After the war, she entered the pre-med program at Columbia University in New York, but she left after her parents insisted that she live with them in California. She took her first airplane ride actually in California with what was a famed pilot, a World War One pilot named Frank Hawks, and from that point on, she was really hooked. She started flying lessons in January of 1921 with a female flight instructor whose name was Netta Snook. To help pay for these lessons, she worked as a filing clerk at the LA telephone company. Later that year, she purchased what would be her very first plane. It was a second-hand Kenner Airster, and it was this tiny little cute thing, and it was yellow, and so she called it the Canary. So she's got her plane now. She's got some education. She's kind of out in the world. So her aviation career actually started to take off here. She passed her flight test in December of 1921, and she earned her, I guess it was called the National Aeronautics Association license at the time. And literally just 2 days later, licensed and ready to rock, she had her first flight exhibition at the Sierra Airdrome in Pasadena, California. In the mid-20s, she did move to Massachusetts. And this is just a fun little aside because I really want to show kind of the breadth of this woman. But anyway, she's flying in the sky. She's had some college. She's been a nurse by this time. And she then decided just to move back from the West Coast to the East Coast to Massachusetts, where she became a social worker at what is known the Denison House. And this was a settlement home for immigrants in Boston, though she did continue to pursue her aviation career. So during this time, she set a number of records. Her first record came in 1922 as the first woman to fly solo above 14,000 feet. This flight lauded her international fame, and she wrote about it in this essay called 20 Hours and 40 Minutes, which was pretty cool. I read a little bit of it. It's fun. She's really smart, very witty, and pretty observant, you know? So this gave her the opportunity to also lecture on tours across the United States. And much of this publicity was handled by a publisher known as George Palmer Putnam. And what's interesting about this is I never knew she was married. Did you know she was married?
Oh, yeah. We'll get
You
into it a little
did.
later. Yeah,
You
I
did.
did.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So I didn't. And so George Putnam is actually of Putnam Publishing, which still exists today. It's a large publishing house. And one of the things that I found interesting was the fact that people seem to hold a lot of different types of roles here because he's a publisher, but he was doing publicity, and they're not the same thing. But I think the rich at this time, I mean, it was an interesting time. It was a weird time, but the wealthy were definitely giving into folly. Like, kind of whatever they thought was of interest, they would seek it out. And so they had their hands all over the place, which is, I think, how these two people even crossed paths because she was, you know, a lady in disguise and he was this, I suppose, it up and coming publisher. And that's just like, it was like society. Society within this time was kind of across all of America because America was so sparsely populated. So if you were in the air quote 1%, you knew everybody knew each other, you know?
Sure.
Anyway, so she did marry this guy, but she never took his name, which is why I guess I never knew she was married to begin with. In 1932, she became the first woman and the second person after Charles Lindbergh to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. She flew from Newfoundland, Canada, on May the 20th in a red Lockheed Vega 5B and arrived just a day later in a cow field, landing near Londonderry, Northern Ireland. Once she came back to the U.S., she was actually awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross by the U.S. Congress gave that to her. And this was a military decoration awarded for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in an aerial flight. She was the first woman to receive this honor. In addition to her piloting feats, Earhart was also very progressive. She was a very progressive woman. She loudly and proudly encouraged women to reject constrictive social norms and to pursue various opportunities, especially in the field of aviation. In 1929, after placing third in the all-women's air derby, this was the first transcontinental air race for women. She helped to form the 99s. This is an international organization for the advancement of female pilots, and she was the president of this organization for many, many years. It was consist of licensed pilots, and it actually still exists today. Currently, it represents women flyers from 44 countries. She also debuted a clothing line, which I thought was pretty cool, in 1933, and this was kind of like early active wear, right? It was for women who were like out and about and just doing things that, you know, maybe they didn't traditionally do. So in 1935, she made history again with the first solo flight from Hawaii to California. This hazardous route of 2,400 miles which was about 500 miles longer than her original Atlantic crossing. She departed from Honolulu on January 11th and later landed in Oakland the following day. Shout out to the Bay. Okay, so let's talk about the fateful flight. So on June 1937, Earhart took off from, again, Oakland on an eastbound flight around the world. It was her second attempt to become the first pilot to ever circumnavigate the globe. She flew a twin-engine Lockheed 10E Electra and was accompanied by flight navigator Fred Noonan. So they flew to Miami and then down to South America, across the Atlantic to Africa, east to India, and Southeast Asia. There they reached a country in New Guinea called Ley on June 29th. And when they reached this country, they had already flown 22,000 miles. So she was doing it. They were in the air, flight was going according to plan. People were seeing them, they were touching down. Things were amazing. They actually only had 7,000 more miles to go before coming back to Oakland. And so they departed for a tiny island known as Howland Island. This was going to be their next refueling stop on July 2nd, actually. But unfortunately, she and Noonan lost radio contact with the US Coast Guard and then disappeared completely from the route. And this was unfortunately the last time she was ever seen or heard from. Okay, so we're going to do some crash theories and then we're going to gossip. So there's tons and tons and tons of theory. I think that she is one of those figures, those public figures that has a lot of lore around her. And I think it's twofold. I think it's because she really was super dynamic. Like this woman was living her life in fifth gear. She didn't care what people thought about how she was living her life. She was doing what would have considered to be a lot of masculine things, but she
Yes.
was doing it, breaking records, right? It was all on her terms. So she was already, like, even if she hadn't died, I think she would have been considered a pretty dope historical figure. But the fact that she died in the way that she did, I think has just added to kind of, again, her lore. So here are some theories. Some people think that the plane ran out of gas while she searched for the island that she was going to refuel at. And before they got there, it crashed into open ocean somewhere in the vicinity and was just lost forever. There's also this group called the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, and they think that Earhart and Noonan veered off course from Howland Island and actually landed about 350 miles southwest on an island called Garland, and it's now called Nikamurua in the Republic of Kiribati. This island had been uninhabited for a really long time. About a week after their disappearance, Navy planes did fly over the island and they noted signs of recent habituation, but found no evidence of an airplane. They believe that Earhart and maybe Noonan, I don't know why they don't think that he's included in this, but they, maybe because she was roughest and toughest. They think that they may have survived for a couple of days or even into weeks on the island as castaways before just expiring there. Years later, almost about 70, I don't know, quite a bit of time later, that same group led some expeditions to the islands. And they are saying that they've turned up some artifacts and some anecdotal evidence in support of the hypothesis that they crash landed on the island. Some of the artifacts include some plexiglass that may have come from the Electra's window, a woman's shoe dating back to the 30s, some improvised tools, a cosmetics jar from the 30s, and bones that appear to be part of a human finger. All right. Another theory suggests that they were captured and executed by the Japanese. And that is absolutely something we need to discuss because the Japanese were at war with everybody. This is something I'm just discovering. I had no idea. So that's something that they think is that they were captured and quickly executed. And then the last theory that I just thought was kind of funny, it claims that they served as a pair of spies for the Roosevelt administration and assumed new identities when they came back to the United States. So some people think they're gone. Some people think they lived quite a bit of time after. Unfortunately, we will never know. But I just thought she is such a cool figure, just doing dope things. She would definitely be called a boss lady in today's age. And I'm glad we get to talk about her and highlight her life on the pod.
Absolutely. Shout out to Amelia Earhart. Beautiful, beautiful soul. All right. So I like that we have our format as such that I don't know what you're going to talk about. You don't know what I'm going to talk about, but we kind of all, as a thought tapestry, are going to weave some shit together.
I
Okay.
have so much to say
So
about this.
lean in. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
So I know one of our last podcasts we talked about Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. We
Yeah.
talked about my neighbor across the street that was, did these little excursions from time to time to Scotland. But how about he was married to a lady named Virginia that actually was a part of the 99s that actually did know Amelia Earhart.
What? That's so
And
cool,
funnily
girl.
enough, we are wearing the color yellow, which she always talked about this yellow plane, she always told me, as you know, a child of the 70s, a child of the 80s, we were just, we would just go sit with people in their house.
Oh
We didn't have
yeah.
any fear of
Yes.
strangers. But the Guthries were an amazing couple. She often told me stories about Amelia Earhart and how she knew her. And she's like, and you know, these black and white pictures don't do that woman justice. That woman was beautiful. She was a beautiful
Oh.
soul on the inside and the outside. They make her look all scruffy and scrappy, but she was dope. She was very
Hmm.
beautiful from what I remember her stories being that she was very pretty. And she, she just would recall these memories, and I could see her just thinking about like all the
Oh, how
heyday.
cool she was. Yeah, the
Yeah,
time
she
when
was
they
just
were
like,
getting it in.
she was brilliant. She was beautiful. She was smart. She was down to earth. And my neighbor across the street, she's from the Galveston area. So she was sort of what you call like a debutante
Yeah.
in her day.
Yep.
So her family had a little bit of money. So, I'm sure that afforded her the ability to become a flight, to go ahead and fly.
Sure.
And
Sure.
we
Yep.
also talked about the conspiracy theories. And this is the conspiracy theory that I was left with from Virginia.
Ooh,
Bless her
from the
soul.
almost yes, I'm tell me.
So she would say to me, they did not want women to do much of anything, right?
Hmm.
They didn't want us to to vote. They didn't want us out the kitchen. Basically, they didn't want us doing anything. And she said that, her theory was um, that they shot her plane down because how could she outdo a man? Charles Lindbergh did his thing or whatever, but how dare
Oh.
you overshadow a man's
Oh
accomplishment?
wow.
So her theory was that she's like, there's no way she would have, lost tracking, lost time. There's no way she would have crash landed in any sort of fashion. And her theory was that, it wasn't the Japanese, it wasn't, any of those things. It wasn't her, miscalculating the route. It was due to a sabotage. So,
Oh,
yeah,
sabotage.
sabotage, girl.
That's actually funnily enough, not a theory that was anywhere to be found while I was doing my research. So already my interest is piqued because I'm like, huh, how come that's not a ready made theory? But listen, it wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't
Hmm.
surprise me even in the little because they probably didn't think she was going to get very far.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean? Like I think
Hmm.
because I think when she hit that 22,000 mile mark, which was already more than her first record, they were probably like, oh, she's about to do this.
Hmm.
And then, like you said, it wasn't a very, I mean, I was going to say it wasn't a very progressive time for women, but I'm so glad we get to talk about it today because what has changed? But let's talk about what's changed. Let's talk
Yes.
about what's changed. Okay, so one of the things that struck me when I was reading the fact that she went to Columbia, because, at the time women just weren't going to college. And so to me, it was like, oh, go Columbia. Look at this progressive, like college back, I mean, centuries ago. How freaking cool. And then I got hit with the reality that 100 years later, Columbia is caving to what is basically becoming a dictatorship in America, and instead of like celebrating their students, they are actually have agreed to give the current administration student records, records of the students that have protested. They're doing all weird things like banning masks. They did go after that Columbia
What?
student who I think is of Palestinian descent. He's been arrested for terrorism or something. So it's so crazy to me how in 1931, right, literally almost 100 years ago, our country was slowly moving in this direction, right? And how 100 years later we've like skyrocketed back to before then. And then you know what else I started thinking about? I
Yes, what's that?
understand like, the good old days, right? Like just even I'm nostalgic for some of my past decades. But speaking of this administration, one of the things that struck me is like out of all the 100 years or freaking years and years of this country that they could have chosen to go back to, why was it one of the most horrific times of our country's history? Like, why did
Girl,
they choose to mimic some of the worst
the
times
worst
that people
things, the
lived? Like,
worst of the
what?
worst. Oh yeah, you know what would be good? Yeah, slavery. That's the thing. That's what we need to do.
Like, what the
Um,
fuck?
It's crazy. It's
It is
absolutely absurd.
nuts.
It's absurd. I wonder, with doing this podcast, if we're ever going to come to where, like, how many other places have also gone backwards? I don't think too many that, for my recollection, and, I'm not any history buff by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know a little bit about some. But I
Yeah.
wonder how many other civilizations or what have you have gone
They
backwards
don't.
instead of just.
They don't go backwards. What happens is if they don't progress, they crumble. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
okay, there you
That's what
go. Well,
happens.
that
They
maybe that's
just,
why we don't hear. Oh
yeah,
God, America. Oh God, you're on the
yes.
trajectory.
We
You're
are
on the
really,
list.
she's in danger, girl. Yes.
Ooh,
America, you are
girl,
in
you what is
danger.
that? Whippy girl, you in danger.
Yes. So
Mm-mm.
that's why you don't hear about them because you hear about the crumbling of them, right? And then either they just become obsolete and different civilizations are sprung up out of them. But yeah, it doesn't end with like a oopsie. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and that is I'm in awe that somebody would think that this is a great idea.
It was wild.
Oh
A lot
man.
of I mean I think we're at a time where it's a pretty uncertain time. I think one of the things that's tripping me out is why all of these organizations feel feel the need to cave to this administration on things that are so silly, like mask mandates. But
Ugh.
then I really started thinking about it, and it's because of the money. Everything where it's very the money trails are very incestuous in America. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that they were as the lanes are nearly as clear or clean as we thought. And the reason why that is because ultimately the 1% holds all the money and they're involved in all of these things, right? So that's why I think they quickly caved to him because it's like technically they're business partners,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so
you're right.
the business of getting money has to continue. And the way that they're going to do that right now in today's date is to just say, okay, fine, have all our student records, et cetera, et cetera. But what's weird to me, and I mean, so this is what I think about kind of the crash of civilizations,
Mm-hmm.
is I'm not certain what it's going to look like for America. Like I don't think that America will just become like obsolete. I
Right.
think it could start to look like Dust Bowl days, but eventually something has to get rebuilt. Like I don't think that all of these structures are just going to crumble. Like what when this is over, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like assuming that it ever is, like what does that look like? Do you think that you're going to keep the trust of students? Do you think you're going to keep the trust of like donors? I think that's one of the things that's kind of shocking to me is how foresighted or how short-sighted actually all of these businesses. This realistically, I mean, because let's be honest, like some of the things that he's tried to bring before Congress, like with his executive orders, are getting shot down because they're not constitutional, right? And so, if by some miracle, and I honestly am not a sincere, I have no idea how this is going to shake out. Sometimes I'm like, let it all burn down, and I'm like, but I still want, I go back and forth. If the Constitution does get upheld, he'll be out of here in 4 years, right? And so it's like you guys are that short-sighted that you're not even considering like what comes after. And they're not. And that unfortunately is the problem with this country. We're either living in the past or like effing up the present. Do you know what I'm
Oof.
saying? We don't seem to be able
Oof.
to get in a forward thinking place. And it's like, that's where we're supposed to be. Why are we still toiling away with some bullshit? Like, we're always just toiling away on nonsensical things.
Just toiling
It
away.
drives me crazy. And then I was thinking about Earhart and I was like, if she were doing the things that she
Mm-hmm.
was doing today,
Yeah,
literally today in 2025, they would call her a DEI pilot, girl.
for sure. For sure. All up in there. Like we gonna take, girl, did you see how they were trying to take the records from Jackie Robinson? They be
Yes.
taking her ass off there too. Like, you're not on the
Yes.
list anymore. But
Yes.
Lord have mercy. Like this was one of the things that we talk about with women in STEM, right? We talk about there's not enough women, but we did have women. We
We did
had
have
Amelia
women.
Earhart, we had Sally Ride, we had all these great women that have blazed the trail, and least we forget, we shall never forget the epic greatness, and we had they have shot beyond the stars, really.
Literally, yeah.
And Amelia Earhart going out there. And girl, I was thinking like we were talking about. We had also knew about her being like into fashion,
Hmm.
because of my neighbor. And girl, just imagine the fashions that really
Yes.
did like people mimic her look, like her aviator jacket, like her little,
Hmm.
I don't know what they call them pants, but
I
like
think
a
they're
lot
called
of that.
joggers.
Okay, Joffers.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
think a lot of the modern fashion mimics kind of her
I think
swag,
so too. Yeah, she was
takes a little bit
definitely
of
a
here and a little
trendsetter.
bit there.
Yeah, she definitely was a trendsetter. I mean, I love a good aviator look. I
I
mean,
yes,
I feel like the character from Top Gun probably mimics some of her vibes a little bit too, if we're being
I
very
bet.
honest.
Shout out to Top Gun.
Yeah, no, she was definitely a trendsetter. She was just out there kind of doing all kinds of things. And the interesting part about it again is she was like a fully embodied, right? So it wasn't only like self accomplishment. She really wanted to make sure that she was giving back to all kinds of different people, right? Women, I think, were at the forefront of what she was trying to do, but she was a nurse. She did help the wounded, right? She did build houses for or help in like transitional homes so that people that were coming, new to the country could get settled, etc. She was doing all of this while breaking legitimate flight records. So
Yeah,
she's truly iconic. She's really truly iconic. I don't know if there's a space where she could exist in today's society, though. Do you? Like, I feel like she would be considered so controversial in today's society. I really
she
do.
would. She would because I feel like and no offense to any of the women that are doing big things out there, but I feel like for the most part, a lot of women today do whatever they need to do and they rest on their laurels, and then that it lets them carry them on to the ether, whatever, to wherever heights they need to go. They don't continue. Sometimes I feel like they let go of it, they let go of the work, and they stop doing what they're doing, and they just kind of rest. Like, oh, I waited to the pinnacle, and that's it. But I feel like she would have kept going. She would
Yeah.
have kept going and
You know
continuing
what I think
upwards and
she
onwards.
she would have done? I think she would have. Okay, see, I don't think they stop. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts about this, because we are in the corporate space, and that's one of the places where this plays out big time. I feel like it can be hard and a little isolating as a woman when you get to certain heights,
Hmm.
because at that point you're going to look around and it's just going to be a lot of men. And I mean, like we're saying, a lot has not changed in the hundreds of years that we've been occupying this dang nation. And so while they may not be literally shooting you out of the skies, they're probably doing things to keep your plane grounded. Do you know what I
it
mean?
didn't
Like
even
they're
take
just,
flight.
yeah, they're
Girl, we
they're
cannot get off the runway.
yes. You know what I mean? They're giving the pilot, they're giving you the wrong coordinates, whatever. Straight sabotage. And
Oh
it's hard
dang.
to kind of endure in spaces like that. I also feel like because of that, what's also hard is for them to kind of reach back down and pull others up with them. And
Yeah.
that is absolutely something that I'm certain that she did do. I mean, she founded a whole organization and said, like, hey girls, like, it's just cool, come hang out, like, let's
Hmm.
see if you like
Hmm.
flying in the skies. So I
Yeah.
think that we lack that. We really lack that. Like, I think that they get to the top and do rest on their laurels for whatever reasons. It could be just because, again, they've been sabotaged, they're beaten down, they're like, this is cool, I'll hang out here. But they don't seem to reach back down and help other people up. And that's something that men are very good at. They're
Yes.
very good at my buddy this. Oh, I know a guy that, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
oh,
They're
you can
down
say
to
that
like
again. You can
throw
say
some
that again.
opportunity their way, They have no
Yeah, you're
problem doing that.
right. You're right. And as women, I feel like that's one of the things that this month to rally the troops, if you will, around History Month and women in leadership, because we do see that there are women leading, and we want to know, like, I want to know their stories. I want to know how they shattered the glass ceiling. I want to know, like, what are some of the obstacles, because as women, I think we kind of, some of us have the same obstacles, and I don't think it's talked about enough. And I think people think women just do shit just so flawlessly, and big ups to
Hmm.
the women, because we do kind of
Yeah.
make it look easy.
Hmm.
um but I think that other women need to see that they're just women just like us. they have their struggles, they have their families to raise, they have like tragedies that come, and they are resilient, and they still get up every morning to lead, and they have a mind to lead. I think that although women in corporate America, not all of us are leaders, but we all kind of do lead from our households. I think we all
Mm.
lead ourselves in our communities. So whenever the occasion arises, we are leaders, all of us. So I think that's one thing I will thread together with us, that all women are leaders. And looking at Amelia Earhart, she was like certainly absolutely the person that I could look up to. And when I was little, I would think about aviation. I would think about space camp, and I would always go over to my neighbor, talk. We would talk for hours. And this is so funny that this is. It's just so funny that this is the topic today. But she had so many different books about Amelia Earhart and everything, and I would just look at the pictures at times when I couldn't really read well. That's how long I had been going over there, so
Hmm.
from a little, very little girl up into my teens. But I would always grab a book, and she would just chat with me, chat me up about Amelia Earhart. And she's like, I wish I could have gone as far as Amelia Earhart did. She's like, here I am. I'm a housewife. I don't know like what her trajectory was when she met Mr. Guthrie. I think this was I think Virginia was his second wife. So I don't know what her life was like before him, or if she had another husband, or I don't know. But she was a housewife. And when I met her, she was a housewife, and she had been one for many years. So I don't know like what other career she held before, settling down and settling in. But yeah, she was
Yeah.
pretty spunky in her own right. I feel like I could see her smoking her
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
cigarettes,
running around with the girls
running around with the girls, like, yeah, doing all
in
the
their little
things. And
dresses and their little hair.
yes, just
A lot of
chopping it off. Because
darlings.
girl,
Yeah,
that was another thing that women didn't really do, is chop their hair off back
yeah.
in the day. That was like, it was very frowned upon. And she mentioned that she kept her hair short in honor of Amelia Earhart. She always had a
Oh,
short cut.
that's so cute.
She
I love
never wore
that.
her hair longer than her shoulders. And as long as I knew her, she always had a short cut. She would go get
That's
all
really
dolled
cute.
up, get those,
I mean,
those
some
good old cold
women,
curls. But yeah, she definitely would, drift off, and I would just see her. I would be like, oh, she's probably like
going
thinking
back
about
to the
the heyday,
days.
girl, the heyday.
So, what's also really unfortunate, like speaking of kind of women leading and in all different spaces outside of the corporate world, is for her to think that the contribution that she was making in terms of keeping a household wasn't as significant
Hmm.
as, flying
Yeah,
in the sky. And the thing
yeah.
about it, it's different, but I think that frankly, any contribution that a woman is making to others is going to be significant, we that's
Hello.
another thing that gets just glossed over so much, and that's like that unpaid labor aspect of all that we do.
Mm, talk
I
about it.
think in
Talk about
corporate
it.
America, what is it called? I forget. There's a very specific term about it, and it's basically all the little things that women get tasked with doing that kind of hold everything together, right? Like, just these little things that if they weren't happening, things would be just a lot more chaotic. And realistically, weird that they don't admit that, because secretaries and executive assistants have kind of always been a thing. Men have
Hmm.
never really thrived in corporate spaces without that. And those have typically always been women's roles. And so the fact that they don't see that through line of like this type of thinking and being and emotional like regulation is needed to keep things running. There's just a lot of like there's like a lack of respect for that type of stuff, right? But
Hmm.
we as equally as men in the world make things happen.
Yeah.
Like we make things happen. I mean, but women aren't
Hey.
generally, right? Like that's what we
Hmm.
are generally.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, like we can phone it in, and our phoning it in is still going to achieve really massive results,
Right.
We're at a time in the country where they're just kind of questioning everything that's not white male. And it's like we
Yes,
gotta kind of pump the brakes on that a little
we
bit,
do. We
guys,
do.
because this country, and I actually was on TikTok and someone said something about they're trying to turn America into an all white nation. And I was like, Psh, America was never a white country.
Girl, and I felt,
Like,
well,
what are
here
y'all
you go
talking
again.
about?
What are they talking about?
You know what I'm saying?
Girl, just like we were saying in our one of the other podcasts, we were talking about how who all came over here. It wasn't the best of the best,
Yeah.
baby.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
These weren't
It
like kings and
wasn't.
queens and duchesses and dukes, baby.
They were. That's why Amelia was up in Boston trying to teach them how to
Yeah,
assimilate to this American culture because they
yes,
were like, they were on kind of the lower socioeconomic rungs. And so
yes.
they didn't necessarily know like even how to like read or write. So like truly, like and that's the thing about like having conversations with some people because there's like all this discourse now because things are so polarized in America about like the right and the left. Like now people want us to come together and have a conversation. And it's like, why would I talk to you when you're not making any effort to learn about how things really are? So when
Thank
I
you.
have a conversation with you, we're always going to be in opposition because I'm saying the sky is blue and you're saying the earth is flat. Like we are just literally on
Opposite.
different planes.
Two different
So
word.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, like I'm not someone who I used to be kind of willing to entertain people. But now I'm just like, if you had looked around, seen all that's going on and haven't decided to like intentionally find out how things really work, then babe, that's on you. Talk to the wall. I'm so not interested.
Absolutely. We are not engaging in these conversations, girl. We
No.
are not. We need somebody to open up some books at this point. That's what I need them to do.
Right.
I really
That's
need them
so
to
right.
understand that and then like I said, there's that word again with stuff, and I'm like, what are we gonna do again? Again, we're back at this
We're back at it again. We're just
again.
like hamsters on
We
a
did never
wheel.
understand this word again. We need to put it in the like. We need to really like. This needs not to be a word.
Yeah,
We
it needs
just
to
need
be
to
put
get
on
rid of it.
ice. I
But
agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, Stephanie, you were right. Like how holding conversations with these people and just like even entertaining it is just beyond. It's just beyond. It's like, guys, you don't get it. You probably never will get it. And you don't want to get it. And that's
Hmm.
it. And I'm
And
just
that's
gonna
it.
let
Yeah,
y'all have it.
that's it.
And then when stuff, and then people, there's a lot of people I've been seeing white males just crying their eyes out, just crying tattooed tears, and it's just sad. And I'm just like,
Ew, why are they
dude,
crying?
girl, they're just crying because of how the country is going. But who did you vote for, sir?
Not even that, but like, okay, this is what brought you to tears.
This
Like the
this
almost the
is the
worst that could
thing that
happen.
really just this was the bridge, the another bridge that was too far. And they are really out here crying and just going at it like, oh, the tariffs are gonna ruin my business. And I'm
Oh,
like, dude,
whoa. Oh my
they
gosh.
are
Yeah.
gonna ruin your business. Just
They absolutely are,
but
babe.
you wanted this, right? This is what we're
You
talking
had
about,
no
right?
problem when it affected everybody else, and now it's affecting
No
you,
problem at all
and we're
because
returning
they
the
didn't
energy.
think it was gonna affect them.
They didn't. But that is actually what we're talking about as being the problem is you guys don't even understand how interwoven everything is. That's why the freaking Columbia, like I said, is caping to this guy because everything's connected. But you guys want to burrow down in your delusion and believe that like if prices get raised, it won't affect you. Okay, cool. Cool. It won't. It will not. You carry
Girl,
on exactly as
just
you've been carrying on,
carry on.
and let's just see
Yes.
what happens.
Let's see what happens, girl. And then the other day, I think I heard that he that he was talking about the egg prices are down. I don't know when the last time he has ever bought eggs. I just want to ask. Like, does he
Oh my
remember the good old
gosh.
days of eggs? And does he
But
really
I
know what we're
mean,
talking about? Maybe this is his.
I don't know if he knows what we're talking about. I saw somewhere where he was like saying that he didn't like create. I don't know if it was like that he didn't sign or if he didn't create an executive order that he had, but he was adamant that he hadn't done it, and it happened like obviously just a couple of weeks ago. So there could be some issues there. You know what I mean? I also find it really funny that he was like ragging on the trade deal between Mexico and Canada, like it's the worst one that's ever been created, and it's like, buddy, it's yours. So like, do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
I don't
Okay,
know,
so
girl. I
listen,
do
it
know
could
what you
be the
mean.
worst, but
I
it's
just,
definitely yours.
ooh, we're, yeah,
Yeah. So we
bigger
gotta just
headed.
I know.
They,
they
okay.
gotta just they gotta just sit in it. I'm like not even the thing about it is I wish, and I've said this before, I wish that I could to like take joy in it, but it's just affecting me too badly at this point. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
think you're right. I think that's
It's just
why
affecting my
people
my
can't be
literal
like, nanny,
dollars and
nanny, boo boo, stick
cents.
your head in duty.
Yes.
Like, yeah, like we can't do
Yes.
that because we're also
Because
here and
we
like,
know.
damn, did
Yep.
I just pay $29 for 18 eggs or
Yes.
24 eggs or however much? And I know, like, back in the day, even like when I was in my 20s and President Clinton was up there in the White House and everybody was talking about, oh, he's a Democrat. And I think that Bill Clinton was the first president I had voted for at that time. I think that was the first one I actually cast a ballot for.
Hmm.
So when things start, I was really like not really following politics like how I do now, but I remember them saying like, "Oh, he did all of this," and there was a like, what was it called? What's the name of it? Um,
Riot, protest, uproar. Oh,
no,
decline?
what is it called? Like the recession. And I was like, shit, I'm living pretty damn good, girl.
Isn't that
I was
crazy?
living great, and I didn't
See,
understand that. So maybe that's what they're seeing. Like sometimes it affects some other people, but it doesn't affect you. But really, at
yeah,
that
that
time,
could
it
be
I
true.
could see where like I
That could
wasn't
be
really
true.
affected by it because I really wasn't like working, but a lot of things did that Bill Clinton did back in the day had the girls in an uproar because he did talk about how he was going to initiate welfare to work. Remember that?
Ooh, I don't. Tell me more
That was
about
a big
this.
thing. They were saying, and I think he really, really got the ball going because it was a good initiative because a lot of people from whatever time before would sit on welfare and they wouldn't, think that would be, that was their life. There was their livelihood, and that would they were just sitting up. But
Oh,
then he made it that they had to, either take a class or they had to get at least a part-time job in order to continue to get benefits. So that
interesting.
was a big thing that people were talking about back then. It really didn't affect me again
Yeah.
at that time. I could see this thing from many perspectives. Being a working woman, I have been a single mother, and now in corporate America, I see how like it's just like wow, I've come so far. I've seen so many iterations of myself and of things that this government has afforded me. But I do know for sure that a lot of people coming in to this country do see it as for what it is because it will help you get on your feet if you use it the right way.
It really will. It is a country, and the thing about it, that's a really because okay, God, I'm hedging here. I needed to say it, but
Just
I
say
do
it.
feel like there are quite a few people that come into the country and take advantage of what we have to offer. I'll say that. And I've said this to you before. I'm like, listen, I have no problem with it. And I definitely said it within the last like 10 years because things have just gotten crazy in the last decade. And I'll go on record every single time saying that is when Mr. Trump threw his hat into politics. Like in America, things just got shaken up and we've been on rocky ground ever since. And now we're facing a potential collapse. So I think it kind of tracks, but it sucks. But I feel like we have so many issues with our own constituents that we have not yet figured out. It
Mm,
is somewhat annoying to me sometimes that were able to figure out how to help people kind of new to the country set themselves up for success, right? When
hmm
there are people that have lived here for years that
It's
go and try to get that same type of assistance and are just kind of met with closed doors and
yeah,
degrading words and just and kind of
yeah,
tossed aside, right? And so
it's
that's
true.
one of the things, and it sucks because I hate even agreeing with this administration, but I'm a progressive, and I feel like in order to move things forward in a way where everyone benefits, we have to really start examining all of this. I lived in New Mexico and now I live in California, and so both of those places are heavy immigrant states, right? So I've seen kind of like what it looks like when they come in. And this isn't to degrade them as humans, as people at all. It's just to say that there are things that they are given that American citizens are denied regularly, you know?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that does kind of rub me the wrong way. And so I understand policy that says, show me yours and I'll, like, because the government isn't, they aren't a bank. Like, realistically, that money's coming from somewhere and it's actually coming from us, it's coming from
Yeah,
taxpayers. And
yeah.
so I just feel like, in terms of what they get, maybe we make it a little less enticing so that we could just fix everything and then and create a system where they can come in a more kind of process logistical way. That being said, I'm fully aware of the fact that a lot of these countries that they're coming from have been like the US has had a huge hand in kind of destabilizing them.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah, there you
like
go.
this, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
this
Mm-hmm.
never ending circle. But what's
Mm-hmm.
funny, I did see a comment because someone was talking about, I don't know, this immigration, and they were like, well, why doesn't the US work with these nations to kind of help stabilize there? And that's another thing that could be happening, right? Instead of like all this money we're spending to fly them to different countries and build these detention centers, why don't we just go boots on the ground? What we were able to do before, go in and shake shit up, let's go in and fix it. Like, that's
Yeah.
what I think our aid should look like, instead of just money, because then nothing changes. It doesn't
Yeah.
fix anything. You know what I mean? It's just people start taking advantage, and then we're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuck in this mire of indecision and waste. I think there is a lot of waste. And again, I only say that because I know people in this country that could use just a little bit of help, like for a very brief amount of time, that are often denied it. And
Yeah.
then at the same time, if you're looking at the budget, which by the way, people used to be available for you to see where everything's getting spent, you're seeing this line item
Yeah.
and it's like huge amounts of money for immigration services, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not even just the money that's going to the people that are receiving it, it's the staff you have to pay, it's just all this stuff. And government is notably inefficient. So there's that too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was a long ass ramble. I don't even know what we're talking about, but I just have, that's one of the things that does kind of just rankle me in terms of like what I'd like to see fixed. But I don't think that the fix is rounding people up, putting them in a mini jail, and then shipping them off to countries that they don't belong to. I do want to go on record and say that I don't agree with that at all.
Yo, that was crazy.
Bananas.
Oh,
Bananas.
I couldn't. I mean, girl, you can't make this shit up. You really can't.
You really can't.
Like, truth is entirely
It's so
stranger than
crazy.
fiction.
And it is right now. We are living through history right now because honestly, when we look back on this, and I mean,
Hmm.
and not we, I mean they, because we're already thinking this shit is nuts,
Yeah,
right?
we ain't
We're
French, girl.
there. We
Yeah.
don't have to like do too much reflection. Um,
Mhm.
but when they look back on it, they're really gonna say, "Oh my gosh, did I really think that it was okay to just ship people off to like maximum security prisons in countries they weren't from?"
They weren't even from there, girl. But they were some bad hombres.
Were they some bad hombres?
That's what the president said, girl.
Which president? The current one?
The president. He said, you know, those guys, blah, 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 they were some bad
Oh,
hombres.
I do remember that. I definitely remember that. And some
Yo,
of
I
them
was
might be,
like,
listen,
yo, he's a wild man.
some of them might be bad hombres, but at
Oh, yeah,
this
no
point,
doubt. No freaking doubt. No
I
doubt.
think at this point they're just kind of sweeping everyone up in it because they're I mean, this is what actually has given me pause, is the fact that they're stopping like French people, German people, like very white presenting people. And so I'm like, uh-oh, when they start turning on each other,
What's to say? What's to say for you?
when yes, when they start turning on each other, girl, we really gotta start like,
Girl, yeah.
gotta someone who we're gonna have to start braiding roots into our hair again, because
Girl, I've been new. I've been new. Ain't never stopped.
it's like, damn.
Seeds and shells and beads, girl. Yeah, never stopped. Never stopped. Okay.
Because
Yeah, you should
that's
never
just,
stop doing those things. I feel like
oh
those are
yeah.
much needed. Those are the magic, girl. That keeps you connected to your ancestors
No,
for
I agree
sure.
with that. I'm still into it. I think the problem is that we talk too much on social now because a lot of people have seen inside to
Yeah.
our our culture
Yeah,
in ways
mystical magicals, yes.
that
Mm-hmm.
you typically had to be invited into, and now you can just kind of
Yes,
observe
invited
passively.
and initiated, okay? Because
Yes.
we must vet you.
Yes, and we'll
What you
know. We'll
got?
just
What
know,
can we learn
okay?
from you? We'll teach you.
Exactly.
But
This
what can
is
we learn from you? What you
reciprocal.
got? What
Correct.
you
This
got?
is a
Yeah.
give and take relationship, my
Oh
loves.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
But yeah,
Yeah, girl. But I
I
love
do.
this. I love us having this talk, and it's real honest, and and girl, I feel like it's some things needs to be said. Sometimes people are afraid to talk, and
Yeah.
they're afraid
That's
to
the
say the
biggest,
things.
listen, that's the biggest problem is that I don't know. I don't know if it's globally or not, but I mean, I can only speak for America because that's where I live. But it's like we really do have issues just talking. Like,
Yeah,
what's the problem with saying your opinion? And I think the reason why people have a problem with that is because they're not careful with how they deliver shit, right? Like everything
exactly.
doesn't have to be antagonistic or frightful. Like this is just how I feel. Like maybe I shouldn't talk to me. Like how am I going to know if we don't have a conversation? How do you feel
Hmm.
about it? And also, everyone doesn't have to agree on everything. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But that we
Exactly.
are in this society where it's like it has grown more conservative where it's like, oh, I think it started with the fucking beige. Remember when all the beige came in? Like the color just drained out of people's lives.
I can't with you.
These people living
I
like
can't. I can't.
they're
I
living
can't
like
with you. Oh,
like
I do remember that.
they're
I
putting
do remember that.
themselves in like padded cells basically. Like what is just wrong with y'all? And you wonder, remember I was telling you that story about that girl that was sitting on TikTok when they were talking about millennial gray, and you look around her house and it's all gray?
Yeah,
Who
that's crazy.
what in the
Where's the
world?
color?
Babe, like what happened in your brain where you started thinking that?
The shades of gray. Girl, there's a lot of gray in jails. So I
That's what
don't
I'm
know why they picked
saying.
that color. I don't know. I
It's
think
like
it's
it
a way to calm you down. It makes you less radical.
I mean, they could use blue, which is actually better shown to
They
give you
could,
that.
but girl, that'll add a little pizzazz, I feel.
It's just too much
Can't
for
have too
them.
much pizzazz now.
God.
It can't be too
Yeah,
woke.
we just got weird. Everyone,
There's that
black,
word
it's
again.
when, that's it. It's when the white people started saying woke. And then it was like everything was like, that. I think just, what's really funny? They really love a really short phrase to just squawk. What? DI, Trump. They'll go on posts and they'll just be like, Trump. What are you talking about, man? Trump
Yeah.
what? Trump what?
Yeah,
You know what I
girl,
mean?
the one hit wonder girl. This just one word. They feel
Just
like, oh,
it.
it's just so. Yeah, they don't. I don't think they.
BLM,
They.
woke,
Although we speak
DI.
English, I don't think they really understand the language. I don't
Obviously,
think
they
they
don't.
understand how it works.
And also, all of those words are just code words. Now that I'm saying that out loud, they're just code words for black.
Hmm. Yeah, they are.
Us motherfuckers. Because
They
they
are.
can't call us ninja. You know what
They
I mean?
can't. They can't. They
I
can't.
mean, they
Ooh,
could. They could. I mean,
they
if you
could.
try it,
Just
try it.
trying to see.
That's the thing about
Fuck around and
opening up
find
that
out.
throat chakra that we're talking about. Just open your mouth and say it, and whatever happens is what
It
happens.
was girl. That's what I'm saying. I think
You,
that's the problem.
it
And
is.
America's throat chakra is blocked.
It is blocked.
We must do the
It
work.
is, you
We must
guys.
work on
Like, you
this.
gotta start there. Like, you gotta start having a conversation. My word.
Girl, them Twitter fingers and them those what is this called, the what is it called in on the cell phone? It's not the what is it called? It's not Tinky. It's some other thing. When they started doing like the real like shorthand,
Oh,
I don't
QWERTY?
know. What's it
I think it's
called?
QWERTY. QWERTY.
QWERTY.
Hmm.
That's what
Hmm.
happened. They were like, "Oh, we could just chop these words down," but words are very powerful, and
They are very
when
powerful.
typed correctly and when said correctly, they can emit. You can be so powerful with that
You
because
know,
they
I
do
believe
say
that. Yes.
the pen is mightier than the sword. So,
Yes. And
uh,
spelling, as
it's
Erica Badu has told us, is a spell.
is a
You
spell.
know?
It is.
And
They
I'm
didn't.
a
They didn't.
writer, so I definitely believe that. The funny thing about it is everything that I say online, I mean. I don't think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do. Everything
Mm-hmm.
I say online, there was this
Oh
time
yeah.
where I got into this like little fucking, I don't even know. I fell into like the dark side of TikTok because I made a comment, which I feel like has 10 times over kind of come to pass. And I often go to this guy's page and I totally want to poke the barricades and just be like, did you see this? Did
What?
you see this? I'm letting it go because I'm not that petty. But they were all like, do you regret, like the energy with which just these people were hitting me with was like, well, are you this, why'd you say this, do you regret it, like trying to like reason with me and shit. And it's just like,
What?
I said what I am someone who, when I say it, I mean it. And that is the problem. They don't. They get online and just be saying anything, but they don't mean that shit. I'm like, I'm not gonna apologize for something I mean.
They said,
I
do you
won't.
regret it, as if you were gonna backpedal and pussy pop?
So much of them, girl. There was this one girl that was literally doing like a play by play. Like she said this, she said this, she's doing this, she put a
What?
video up. She's not sorry. Like it was bananas. And I was like, you guys came here looking for an apology. You're never gonna get it. Ever.
Never gonna get,
Because
never gonna get, never
I
get.
don't sit online saying shit that I don't mean. Ever. And y'all
Okay,
do. And that's the difference because my
that
throat
is the
chakra
difference.
is not blocked. Funnily enough, the throat is associated to Taurus. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, of all my chakras, this one's open. But I tell everyone to open up their throat chakra. I've told you that. I
Yeah,
tell people all the time because I can always tell when you're holding back, that will start to mess with you.
it will,
But
girl.
you
It
also
can
have
kill you.
to like, if you're gonna let it out, you also have to be prepared for what comes, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people are so disingenuous when they're having conversations because they're weak. People have gotten like sensitive and weak, and it's like that's shit that y'all need to examine. So maybe you don't need to be saying anything to anybody and just go handle that. Start a conversation could go a long way, but you can't even have honest conversations with people. I was talking to a coworker one time and she was telling me that because she lives in Indiana now, but she used to live out in the Bay Area and she was telling me what part of the Bay she lived in. And she was like, yeah, but it was really difficult because there wasn't like a lot of public transportation or whatever. And I said, yeah, that's by design, right? And then she kind of paused and looked at me like a little like, oh yeah. And then it was
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable because she's not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable having those kinds of conversations. I
Mm-hmm.
thought we were just going to talk about how cities get redlined. I feel like it's common
Hello.
knowledge. You know what I'm
Oops.
saying? But it wasn't a
Oops.
conversation she was ready to hear.
Right. Was
And
not ready for that. Mm-hmm.
I think that's the problem. Anywho, I am so glad that you know so much about Amelia. I had so much fun actually researching her. But it did make me a little sad, you know what I mean? Because there are women doing their thing in the world and in America specifically, but man, we don't celebrate women enough. You
No,
know,
no, you
we
don't.
just don't
You do
celebrate
not.
women enough.
You
Maybe
don't.
one day.
One day, someday. Who
One day,
knows?
someday.